One thing we can usually count on during the month of February is a Pokemon Presents, a live Nintendo Direct style presentation taking place on Pokemon Day, which falls every year on February 27th. Pokemon Day commemorates the release date of the original red and green versions in Japan, and is now used as a worldwide day of celebration for the franchise. With the Scarlet and Violet DLC now in what we think is a complete state, and possibly a new Nintendo console coming sooner rather than later, this leaves us in a pretty precarious position when it comes to Pokemon Day announcements. The future of Pokemon could go in one of many different ways, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, it should be noted that for this video, I'm going to be focusing on the video game side of things. This Presents can and will provide details on upcoming events, mobile game updates, and anything else pertaining to the Pokemon franchise, like news on the TV show, merchandise, or the trading card game. But the Pokemon Company almost always uses it to announce one or more of their upcoming mainline titles as well, and this year should be no different. But what kinds of games will we see? Well, with all of the Unova references in recent Pokemon games, like Ingo and Legends Arceus, new forms for the Swords of Justice, and the entire Indigo Disc taking place in Unova, complete with references galore, our minds first have to wander to new games set in the Unova region. Never before has Pokemon been so forthcoming in hinting toward a past region, and it's hard to deny the Indigo Disc has left many with a strong hunch that the game's main series will be heading there next. Of course, the most obvious way they could do this is with Generation 5 remakes. Remakes of the Pokemon Black and Pokemon White games for Nintendo DS. While expecting Generation 5 remakes might make sense based on all the hints, there's actually some strong evidence going against this idea. And mostly this has to do with timing. The shortest gap we've ever had between Pokemon remakes is 5 years. That was Fire Red and Leaf Green in 2004 to Heart Gold and Soul Silver in 2009. Since we're currently less than 3 years removed from our last set of remakes, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, historical precedent really isn't on our side if we're hoping for Generation 5 remakes this year. That said, we still could be going to the Unova region in 2024 without necessarily getting Generation 5 remakes, at least not in the traditional sense. Just like how we visited the early days of Sinnoh in 2022's action-adventure style spin on the series, Pokemon Legends Arceus, there is a chance we could see a new Legends game that's set in the Unova region. The main thing I feel working against a Legends game though is simply the turnaround time. The release of Legends Arceus was just over 2 years ago now, which isn't a lot of time on the game development side of things. That may not be nearly enough time to have a sequel ready to show, especially if they're trying to up the ante and make a game that's bigger and better than Legends Arceus. However, there is a chance that they saw that game's success and positive critical reaction and went to work quickly, pouring a lot of development resources into getting another Legends game together. And maybe they actually had a head start too. Maybe they decided to use the existing base from Legends Arceus as a starting point for this new game. Think Zelda Majora's Mask only taking 15 months to develop because it reused assets from Ocarina of Time. Maybe there is a Legends Arceus sequel ready for this year that uses that game's same engine. And while I definitely like the sound of that, what might actually be more realistic is simply getting confirmation of a new Legends game, with maybe a look at some concept art and a tentative release date of holiday 2024 or early 2025. Regardless of what state we see it in, a new Legends game could be a perfect stopgap title to help fill in time between new remakes and eventually the next generation. With Blueberry Academy set in Unova, Ingo appearing in Legends Arceus, and the myriad of other hints, I really don't see us going in another region besides Unova just yet. I've heard rumors about Johto, such as Legends Johto or another set of Johto remakes, but for me, that's just so random. Of course, it would be cool to see, but saying that is a complete shot in the dark. It's not impossible though. No one thought we would be revisiting Kanto in the first set of Pokemon games for Switch, so it's not out of the question for the Pokemon Company to serve up something Johto out of the blue. And speaking of those first Pokemon Switch games, there is one way we actually do go to Johto. And that's if we end up getting some Let's Go games for the Johto region, the Gen 2 iterations of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, if you will. First of all, Johto makes a lot of sense for a new set of Let's Go games because Johto follows Kanto, making it next up in the natural order. I'd love to see them take the base of Let's Go, make some tweaks and improvements, add in Gen 2 Pokemon, and some bonus extras, like how Let's Go had the Alolan forms. Plus, the Johto games are famous for including the entire Kanto region as post-game. Kanto is already built in this engine from base Let's Go, so it could be a natural fit. Not to mention, Let's Go actually seems pretty likely when looking at the timeline. We're 5 years removed from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee in 2018. Plus, with a general fervor and nostalgia around Johto, I think it's a no-brainer. A new set of Let's Go titles could be a huge success for Switch in 2024. Now, with all this speculation, we can only go so far when relying on historical precedent. Pokemon can always break tradition. For example, Gen 8 was the first set of Pokemon games with a story DLC, and that trend has continued into Gen 9. And look what happened in 2021. We got our Gen 4 remakes, as many expected, but we also got the announcement of Legends Arceus alongside it, an all-new experimental Pokemon title. It's not out of the question that our expectations are subverted this time around too, with the Pokemon Company announcing something brand new. And with the future of the franchise being so unclear right now, that makes a change especially likely. While I wouldn't expect a generational leap just yet, I think there is potential for a completely new kind of Pokemon game to be announced as well, spin-off or otherwise. Because the possibilities for spin-offs are so wide, it's hard to even speculate on. But one thing I will say is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is still an active franchise for Nintendo Switch. While we have to go back to the 3DS for our last all-new entry, getting an original Mystery Dungeon on Switch would be a fantastic Pokemon release for 2024. We got 2 Mystery Dungeon games in the 3DS generation, and besides the 2020 remake of the Rescue Team games, our current handheld home console hybrid is ripe for a new entry, maybe one that features Pokemon from generations 1 through 9. And finally, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the potential for older classic Pokemon titles to hit Nintendo Switch in some way. There is first, of course, having some of the Game Boy titles release on the Nintendo Switch online service. At a glance, this makes so much sense, because the infrastructure for Game Boy and even GBA games is already there. Something like this could be incredible to see. Some of the older Game Boy Pokemon titles with wireless online battle and trading. But the question remains, would something this big ever come to NSO without an extra price tag associated with it? When thinking about it that way, what could make more sense is simply making some titles from classic generations available to purchase on Nintendo eShop. The last time we saw these games re-released was fairly late into the 3DS generation, when the Generation 1 and 2 games came, and that was a huge hit. Nintendo could do a similar thing now in an attempt to recapture some of that excitement, now on an even more popular console with an even bigger install base. There would no doubt be a huge buzz around that announcement, and something like that has huge selling power. If Nintendo wanted to try to break sales records and move as many Switch consoles as possible, they could pair these releases with some limited edition Switch console bundles, which would surely fly off the shelves. The classic Game Boy Pokemon games hitting Nintendo Switch on Pokemon Day as a celebration of the series would set the world on fire. It's an announcement that's arguably big enough to headline a Presents if for some reason a new mainline title isn't ready to show. Regardless of if they simply come to NSO or if they get their own dedicated releases, this could be huge news for the Pokemon Company to share this year, and the Presents on Pokemon Day is the perfect venue to do so. But what do you think? What video game announcements do you think we'll see on Pokemon Day? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section below. Subscribe to the channel if you want more Pokemon and Nintendo discussions like this, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks as always for watching.